This right here is a tomato hook, and these right here are tomato clips or plant support clips. And these are pretty much going to be helping me to trellis my tomatoes for this growing season. For the last 5 years, I started growing my vegetables in my own backyard here in my central Indiana garden. I'm in zone 6. And 5 years ago, I pretty much turned my backyard into a kitchen garden. I had been growing flowers for many, many years, but it wasn't until recently when I started diving into the world of growing vegetables. And I found out that growing tomatoes, indeterminate tomatoes that is a passion of mine. I love everything that has to do with growing those juicy, big, and small tomatoes. But if you have grown indeterminate tomatoes in the past, you know that it's a challenge and a struggle trying to find the right trellis, trying to find the right way to trellis them, because normally by the middle of the season, these plants are huge. They get pretty huge. And one of the things that I struggle growing in my urban garden is that I don't have the space. I don't have a huge property, but I do want to grow a lot of tomatoes. I want to grow different varieties, different types. So I'm always trying to look for that system, that way to trellis the tomatoes so that I can grow as many as possible in my small space. And since 5 years ago, when I started growing my own vegetables at home, I also started growing from seed. Before that, I had never grew anything from seed. And you know, there is no secret that I love bootstrap farmers. And early in the year, when I was looking at some of the resources on their website, I found something that had to do with trellising tomatoes called lower and lean system. I had no idea at the time what it was. I looked into it. They had a couple articles. I went through their YouTube, I checked some videos, and I was really intrigued. That's where these hooks come from Bootstrap. But because the articles that they share are more towards the farmer, you know, the people with the hoop houses, I look on YouTube, of course, to see if maybe some home gardeners were doing this in a smaller scale and how they were doing it in their own backyards. And I found many people with great videos, with great resources, great ideas on how they put together, on how they apply this system, the lower and lean system. And from what I have seen, these people love this way to trellis the tomatoes. So at this point, I'm not really sure what to think yet because my tomatoes are very small. We haven't even started growing. We haven't even gotten to, you know, the 4 feet tall size. But I'm really excited about it. Hopefully towards the end of August, I can give you a more updated video on how this system is working for me. So what is this lower and lean system using these tomato hooks? Well, I call them tomato hooks. They're really tomato roller hooks. And the simplest way to explain this to you is that this tomato roller hook is going to help me to trellis a single tomato plant using this string. But the plants, the tomato plants, need to be growing as single plants, single stem plants. And the way that you attach these plants to the string is by using these tomato clips or plant support clips. The clips don't really grab onto the plant, but instead they grab onto the string and they wrap around the tomato plant. So there is really nothing really squeezing your tomato plants. The actual clips are actually sticking to the string. I'll show you more about that here in a second. And as the tomato plant grows or the tomato vine grows, then you keep on using these tomato clips to attach the plant to the string. Now, once the tomato plants reach the top of your string where you have this hanging, then you unhook this, you release some of the string, and you lower the plant and you lean it to the side. Again, if this is not making much sense right now, it will once we have these plants a little bit taller and I can actually show you how that's going to look like. So this is how I am going to trellis my tomatoes this year. And because this is all too new right now, let me take you back a few weeks ago when my husband put this together so that I can show you exactly how I set this frame and I set these hooks and or how I'm using this for my plants so that it makes a little bit more sense. A few weeks ago, my husband helped me build these frames. We pretty much needed to have a frame where to hang these tomato rollers. And When it comes to having a frame, a lot of people, a lot of gardeners choose to do whatever they have on hand. And a lot of people use T-posts with some sort of heavy duty string, or they use a wood frame, or they use wood and string, or some sort of conduit. Whatever you just have to make sure that the frame is strong, because it's going to hold the weight of your plants, of all of your tomato plants, once they are full of tomatoes. So having something that is strong to begin with to hold all of the weight of your tomato plants is key. I decided to use a combination of 4x4 wood posts and a galvanized pipe. Now that galvanized pipe is going to be attached to those 4x4s, and I'm actually using the back of the existing arbor that is back there to have the other side of the frame. So half of the weight is already done there for me. And we didn't use concrete to bury that post inside those raised beds. My husband just pretty much made a huge hole. And the way that we attach that galvanized pipe to the wood post is by using one of those anchors. I call them anchors. It's like a metal, heavy duty metal plate. The actual name of that is a pipe floor flange. I'm not even sure that I'm saying that correct, but but it has a thread in the middle where you just pretty much screw the pipe into it, and is really well attached to the wood. And of course, because I have everything already here black, I painted that black. The pipe, I spray painted it, and the wood post, I just use regular black paint for outdoor use, nothing fancy. So as far as the frame goes, everything looks that, that is custom made, that it belongs here. Why? Because that's just me. That's just the way that I like it. Once I had my frame set up and ready to go, the tomato roller hooks and the clips are going to be pretty much the main players here. I got my tomato rollers, like I said, from Bootstrap. Why? Well, because I just trust their products, and I am happy to say that they are sponsoring this video. As I mentioned before, I have been using their seed starting supply since 5 years ago, pretty much when I started my journey into seed starting, and they have a collection of resources on their website where you can pretty much learn and get inspired to do your own growing at home, whether that's flowers or vegetables or both. You can really find some inspiration there. They have plenty of ideas and tutorials on how to grow your own in your own backyard. If you haven't checked them out, head over to their website and let me know what you find. The way that I'm going to be using these tomato hooks is that they're going to be pretty much hooking onto something. They're not wide enough to hook into that pipe, so I am using just regular heavy-duty black zip ties. If you notice, I have plenty of zip ties that are set up. I have quite extra, and I did this because once I get the tomatoes to get moved to another spot, I gotta have an empty zip tie to where to hook the next roller, if that makes sense. Like I said, this probably is going to make more sense as we go through this video. Now let me talk a little bit about the tomato hooks, because if you are anything like me, when you see this for the first time, you're gonna have no idea how it works. Like, do you unhook the string? Like, how do you do that? This roller may look a little bit complicated, but don't be afraid. This thing is set up so that the string is permanently attached to it, but as soon as you release the sides, which you have to use one finger on each side, as soon as you release that, then you can let go of, then you can get as much string as needed. And once you stop releasing, then it gets back to being block, if that makes sense. So when you need a little bit of string to lower and lean your tomato plants, this is going to come in really handy. And like I said, the tomato clips or the plant support clips, they actually attach to the string. They don't squeeze, they don't attach to your actual plants. They wrap around the plant, but they don't actually cut anything or put pressure on any of the plants. And this was something that I didn't know when I got this. I wasn't sure how they were going to be safe to, put around the tomato plant, because pretty much this was going to be holding most of the weight of the plants. But as you can see here, they attach to the string, and then they just hold on to the plant on each side. So we have our frame, and you got your tools ready. Now comes the planting. And by the way, I ended up removing the string lights that I had there around my raised beds. I had those strings for about 4 years now. They had been outside for 100% of the time, and some of the bulbs were not working anymore even after replacing the bulbs. I definitely think these were worth the $30 that I paid for the set. As far as tomato plants, I got 10 on each row. So I have 10 tomato plants on one side and 10 tomatoes on the other side for a total of 20. Without looking at the raised bed, if you just think of the frame is 12 feet long. So I have about 12 inches of space between each tomato, and yes, that is a little bit tight, but I am really hoping that this system works. And if something happens where I think that they need to be a little bit farther away next year, then I'll definitely tweak that for sure. I have the tomatoes here by pairs, mainly because I wanted to use just one tag for 2 tomatoes. And the metal tags that I'm using here are from Green Stack, and I'm using just a regular Sharpie to write the name of the tomato plants. With my tomatoes planted and my tools ready to go, it's time to start attaching the plants to the string. And this is probably the part that is going to get some used to, at least for me. Like many new things, this system of lowering and leaning is very hands-on. It is very involved. Why? Because you gotta make sure that your plants stay a single stem or single branch plants, and that means constantly checking the tomato plants to make sure that you are removing the suckers. If you have grown indeterminate tomatoes before, I mean, those suckers show up overnight, and by the time that you notice them, they're already a foot tall. Once you notice that the plant is needing some support, you start by attaching the clip to the string. Again, the only thing that is being clamped here is the actual string, not the plant. As the plant grows, you keep on adding clips, ideally in spots where the fruit or the leafy branch is not going to be damaged. And right now, the plants are only about maybe getting close to 2 feet tall. So I only have 2 clips per plant, and I'll probably wait another week before I add another clip to the top of these tomatoes, depending on how quickly they grow. Right now, being the beginning of June, my tomatoes are doing so well. They struggle a little bit as seedlings for some reason, but once I got them in the ground, all that rain and that sunshine is doing wonders for these plants. Like I said, hopefully I can do another video in August once these tomato plants are quite big and I'm actually doing some lowering and leaning. If you never heard of this method for trellising tomatoes, it could be a bit hard to comprehend or to make sense for you at this point with the plants being so little. But if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments, or if you see another question that somebody else has and you're a very experienced gardener with this system, feel free to answer for me. I truly appreciate it. This tomato plant right here is trying to grow another sucker on the side, and it's actually pretty big by now. And the risk that I get right here with this tomato sucker being almost as big as the top is that I can damage the plant by removing the sucker, but I'm going to cut it anyway to make sure that this plant stays a single stem. Again, using this trellising system, you have to be constantly checking on these plants to make sure that those suckers don't take over. The good thing about finding these big suckers though is that you can easily propagate them. As far as having new plants from these tomato plants, you just remove some of the branches from this sucker and you place it in water. You keep it in a shady place outside, you keep an eye on it, and about 2 weeks later, that stem is going to start growing some roots, and you get to have free plants. If you have a container or if you have some space that is going to be free here pretty soon, if you have garlic or onion that is going to be harvested soon, then you get to get some free tomato plants by propagating them this way. If you do get to propagate your tomato plants from the suckers, do make sure to tag them, because if you're anything like me, you think that you're going to remember which plants were which, and sometimes that's not the case. This method, while it's amazing, it is not exclusive for tomatoes. You can use this for any of your vining plants, vegetables or flowers really. Cucumbers, small melons, Malabar spinach are some of the things that I have seen other gardeners trellis using these tomato hooks. Let me show you. On this raised bed that I have against the garage, it's on the east side of the garage, I have a small section where I'm using these tomato hooks to trellis cucumbers and sugar baby watermelons, and they are going really well so far. The frame that I am using here is very simple. It's just some heavy duty T-post that I spray painted black with a galvanized pipe that is attached using some wire, nothing fancy. And I'm using the same idea, some zip ties, black, and the hooks being attached by those. I haven't had to prune any of these vines, but my biggest thing is just separating each other because those little arms that they have want to hang out on the next string over the other side, and that's pretty much my battle right now with these things. Having this system for the cucumbers and the watermelons is a lot easier because they help attach themselves to the strings. And because I am obsessed with growing tomatoes, I have another section on the very back of my garden next to the asparagus where I have 5 tomato plants being trellised by this system. And the frame is again just a piece of pipe with some heavy duty T-posts that I spray painted black. I posted a couple of stories on my Instagram a couple of days ago where I was showing you how my tomatoes were growing and how some of my cucumbers were doing really well, and you guys had a lot of questions, so I hope that this video answered a bunch of them. Again, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments, and I hope that this video was inspiring, and hopefully if you have been wanting to try this method for growing your own tomatoes, maybe this gave you a tip or two. Thank you for being here, you guys, and I'll see you on the next one.